All right, my friends, welcome into episode 180 of the Leaning Into Leadership podcast. My guest on the show today is my friend Greg Speranza. Now, here's what I want you to know about Greg. Greg is a leadership coach, he's a school quality expert, and he is an organizational development specialist. Now, Greg also, in his past, has some time leading charter schools. He is a turnaround school leader, and he's really somebody who understands the incredible responsibility and stress that goes into being a school and district leader. Greg and I sat down and had a conversation about the importance of leadership coaching, about how you go about turning an organization around, and about some of the things that very specifically go into helping leaders continue to get better, continue to grow, all while leading their organization toward success. This is a really fun conversation. I'm really glad I had the opportunity to sit down with Greg, somebody I've gotten to know a little bit over the last year or so. I know you're really going to enjoy this conversation. So get comfortable, grab a seat, take some notes, because this one's certainly worth your time. We're going to get to this episode right after this. Hey leaders, let me take you back to my early days as a high school principal. I thought I had to do it all, put out every fire, manage every crisis, and be the superhero I thought my school needed. Honestly, I was overwhelmed. I was exhausted and just felt like I was spinning my wheels. It wasn't until I got clear on my values, on my time, and on my systems that everything changed. Now, I've taken everything I learned from that experience, plus years of coaching leaders all across North America, and designed a course to help you take control of your leadership. The course is called Take Control of Your Leadership, and it's built for leaders just like you, leaders who are tired of the overwhelm and who are ready to focus on what truly matters. In this course, you will learn how to manage your time like a pro so you can stop putting out fires and start leading with intention. You'll learn how to build positive culture where everyone feels seen and heard and valued and trusted. You'll refocus on teaching and learning, becoming the instructional leader that your school needs. And you'll work on staying aligned with your vision and making real progress towards your goals. Whether you're in your first year or your 15th year as a leader, this course gives you the tools and the strategies to lead with clarity, confidence, and purpose. Are you ready to stop spinning your wheels and start leading with impact? Head to theprincipalacademy.com and check out Take Control of Your Leadership today. And don't wait. Your school deserves the best version of you and of your leadership. Let's make this happen together. So today on the show, my guest is Greg Speranza, and Greg and I are going to have a little conversation here about school leadership, about leadership coaching, and about just that leadership development piece. And you know what I really appreciate about my guest today, Greg and I shared some time together last year working with New York State, with doing some support for assistant principals and principals across the state. And I know Greg's just doing some amazing work out there. So let's not waste any more time. Greg, welcome into the Leaning Into Leadership podcast.
Darren, thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure.
Absolutely, man. I'm stoked to sit down and have a conversation with you and actually hit the record button, as opposed to some of our other conversations we've had that didn't get recorded. So let's do this just to kind of orient the audience a little bit into who Greg is and what you're all about. Jump in the DeLorean. Let's go back in time here as far as you want to go within reason, and maybe kind of orient the audience a little bit on who you are and what you're all about.
Well, it's hard to believe I've been in education now for 35 years. I don't know about you, but when I was a new teacher coming out and I ran into teachers or administrators that have been around for 35 years, I'm like, oh my God, they're so old. That's impossible.
Right, I know,
All
yeah.
of a sudden, it's nuts. So now we've been in the field for that long or close to it. So I started out as an English teacher for middle school, and then I realized pretty quickly that I wanted to get into school leadership or some type of management, organizational development. So I got my degree and my master's degree in secondary leadership at Canisius University, and ran a residential treatment center school for 4 years, which was interesting. all the kids were sent there by the courts or other means. I'll tell you, everyone should have to work in a school like that for a period of time. It makes every other school seem much easier by comparison because you're dealing with kids that really have some traumatic issues that they're dealing with, and you have to develop a lot of skills very quickly. And there's an explosive atmosphere sometimes, and then sometimes you have the sweetest, most loving kids, the same kids. So you have to recognize that they're kids. But it was a great environment to start in. Then I was a charter school person for about 10 years after that. I worked with several charter schools. I was a turnaround person. So an organization would hire me to come in if their school got off to a bad start, and they had to get a couple good years of data. So I was a principal in Buffalo and Syracuse and Raleigh-Durham and Cleveland, Ohio and Dayton, Ohio. And that was fun until it wasn't. It's very stressful, as you know, in turnaround work. I think you can relate to that. You're constantly trying to change adult behavior, which is what we're going to get into in a little bit. And then I saw these consultants were coming from the state because charters have to have these companies come in from the state and basically rate the school to keep them open. And I just thought they're having a lot more fun than I'm having right now, and I want to do what they're doing. So I started doing what they're doing, and I was fortunate enough to work with some really major companies doing that type of work, and learned a lot about leadership development, rigorous instruction, what high quality looks like, using rubrics as a standard to look at a school, and then find the gaps between where they're at and where they need to be, and recommendations and the trainings and all that. Really organizational development. And then that morphed into coaching. And I've been doing some mentoring with the project we had mentioned earlier. But I've also done a lot of coaching across the country. And coaching piece is just fantastic because you're dealing generally with very motivated people to begin with that want to get better at what they do. And coaching itself is different than mentoring. Mentoring is sort of when you put your arm around a person's shoulders and say, hey, you might want to consider this, you might want to consider that. Where coaching is just reflective. You're dealing with someone on your level, experience-wise often, who want to get better, and you're just basically reflecting back to them. You're also offering insights and strategies in that, but you're also a critical thought partner is how I like to phrase it. It is a blast. And, when you get the right people you're coaching with and they see the gains as a result of the coaching, it's just fantastic. So I've been doing that for quite a long time. And just went through a University at Buffalo, New York coaching certification program, which is for all coaching, not just school coaching, but coaching businesses and not-for-profits. And learned a lot of new strategies doing that, and been working with a lot of business leaders now too. And that's where I'm going to continue going, sort of toggling between school and business and non-for-profits, working with leaders.
There's a lot in there to unpack, and a lot in there that I really, really, really like, especially even just this last piece with talking about, going through, another certification program for yourself to just continue to learn and grow and get better. And I think as coaches, that's one of the most valuable things that we can do is continue to sharpen our own blade so that we can then, continue to support those that we're working with. Man, there was so many really, really good things in there. Let's go back to the charter school experience, just really quick. I'm not going to hit all of them, but I want to hit that one. I'm a little bit curious. Talk to me about maybe some of the leadership lessons that you learned there versus previously being with a residential program.
Well, there's massive accountability in the charter school world. If you do not show the data within 5 years, the charter states you have 5 years, and actually it's 4 years because your charter decision is made in year 5. A lot of schools get off to a slow start their first year. They have a lot of new teachers, all new students, of course, new school community. And then they have years 2, 3, and 4 to really get it together. And if it's not, they can be shut down. So what you're trying to do really quickly coming into a situation like that is stabilizing, figuring out what the issues are. A lot of times it might be classroom and student management, but also practices-wise. Most of the charter schools that I've worked in, they have very didactic-type teaching programs where I'm delivering things basically from a textbook because they have such churn sometimes. And you have a lot of new teachers coming in, and they're not necessarily adept at looking at the standards and unpacking and coming up with learning targets. And so you're giving a lot of really, it's a lot of teacher talk, to be honest with you. So you try to share new strategies, and you're trying to repair practices that maybe were not great to begin with. And you're giving a lot of, I don't even know if I'd call it coaching. You're basically saying, this is what we need to do, and I'm going to talk to you every time I don't see it. Because if I walk into a classroom and I've shared an expectation and we've provided training and it's not happening, if I walk out without saying anything, the teacher thinks they're doing it right. I am by omission saying that they're doing a fine job. If you're walking in the hallway and the kids are all over the place and they know it's supposed to be single file or in some type of organized manner, and if I don't stop the line and address the kids, I wouldn't address the teacher because I'm not going to embarrass the teacher. But I'm going to address the kids. The teacher knows indirectly I'm addressing them, saying, no, we have to do it this way, because orderly line means kids go into their classrooms orderly, they sit down, they get their stuff, as opposed to pushing and shoving, which leads to 20 minutes of chaos when they go in the classroom. So there's like 100 little things. It's never 100% thing. It's always 101% things, right? That you're trying to shape at one time. And it can be, it's a lot. It's an awful lot. And then, of course, the data has to come back positively. You have your interim assessments. You have your formative assessments. You have this and that. So you're trying to do a lot of things on the fly, which is extremely energizing, especially when you start seeing progress.
Yeah.
But it is exhausting. It is absolutely exhausting.
Yeah, and then you follow that up with going and being a turnaround principal, which and this is honestly why I went to the charter school piece first, and then we'll loop to being a turnaround principal. So many of the listeners of my show I know are early career leaders. I know that they're folks that are just getting started, and in many cases, not all, but in many cases right now, Greg, principals, and you work with them too, they're taking over schools that you just described. They're taking over those types of situations where there's been a bunch of different leaders turn over. The teachers have turned over tremendously. Expectations are low. The really good staff that are there have just kind of retreated into their own little silos, and they're just trying to stay out of the line of fire, if you will. Yep. We see it all the time, right? And so, you know, when you think about both what you described in the charter world, I'm certain that your turnaround world was exactly the same thing, right? We've got to get to some place where we have consistency of expectation, consistency of teaching and learning practices, you know, consistency in how we utilize data, some of those types of things. So let's spend a little bit of time on just everything to do with that. You've already kind of touched on it, but maybe let's look at it a little bit more from the lens of a coach. So I'm a newer principal. I'm listening to this podcast right now. Greg, what would you tell me to be thinking about right now if I have a situation like what you just described?
I think it comes down to the vision piece. And what do I want to see and hear when I walk through the hallways, when I walk into classrooms, when I'm hearing teachers talk about kids and data meetings, when we have our guests, our community members come in, what do they see and hear? What do I want all this? What do I want this to look like? And then from there you work backwards. Okay, so where are we now? And then you have the gap. And then you try to address the gap with the staff. But not everything at once. You just try to get things semi-organized at first so that we can walk in the hallway. During lunch, it's orderly. During arrival, dismissal, it's orderly. When kids go between classes, it's orderly. If you can just establish that to start, that's a win, because you're trying to change the culture, and the culture has to be around orderliness, respect. I'm not talking about compliance all the time. I'm just talking about kids need to feel intellectually, physically, and emotionally safe. So does staff. So does anyone in that building. So until that's established, nothing else is really going to stick. But then once we see improvement in certain areas, and I'd probably have some metrics assigned to these things, I would say, hey, look, we went down from 28 referrals in a week for disorderliness in the hall to 6. That's a win. I used to actually, we'd have hall walking contests to establish this culture. And I don't want to get off and just talk about this, but this is an example. So we have, and I wish I could remember it, we'd have the 5 R's or something like, or speed, or the 5 S's, speed and spacing, and we'd have a rubric, and we'd have every class have to do through this. You would not believe how seriously these kids took it. And they were the same kids that were running through the hallways the week before, but then we had contests, and it got some school spirit. People got motivated. They took pride in how they conducted themselves. So anything you want to change, affix some type of competition to it, at least that's my perspective. Like when we want to get parents in, I would give gift cards to the people that had the most parents that would come in, that they met with, either face-to-face or phone call. But we went from, like, in one of my schools in Syracuse, we went from 20% the previous year to 75, 80% the following year, meeting parents twice a year for parent-teacher conferences. And we have teachers race to the hallways, especially the specials teachers, going from one to another. And it was just a big, special thing that we did. Ultimately, what we did when the school year started was we would have all the data we've collected to date in September. So we'd have our interim assessments, we used NWEA, we'd have our common formative assessments, we'd give the past couple state tests. We'd get all the data, all the teachers have it organized on a graphic organizer. I'd have each one come up to the board and put down what their goals are for their kids. And it developed a sense of unity, and I would keep those goals, and I would send them out every 2 or 3 weeks. I would post them and enlarge them in the staff room. And we met to exceed our goal every single year. And these were goals that could never be less than 50% of your kids meeting or exceeding. And it blew things out of the water. And it just created a very high expectations and some fun competition for the staff and the kids.
Yeah, I think that's outstanding. And I think the more, I like how you phrase that, actually. I mean, I think, if competition is something you can do healthy in your environment, then it's certainly something that is worth pursuing. And what you're really talking about in many ways is changing some mindsets, you're changing some perspectives, and obviously you're changing some behaviors. And certainly this is something that I know a lot of newer administrators, or even when an administrator is new to a school, they've done this for a long time, and they come into a new facility, new building, or whatever the case may be, and you're ultimately going to have to address adult behavior. You're going to have to change the behavior of the adults in order to change the outcomes that are happening in the school. And you and I had talked about this. We had talked about before we hit the record button about really leaning into changing the behaviors of the adults. So I want to come back to it with the record button on and get your perspective on some steps or some insight you can share for school leaders on how you go about addressing adult behaviors that you don't want to see or that just need to change, or mindsets that need to change, because, man, that's just such a common challenge for school leaders.
Yeah, and probably the toughest part of that is trying to have everyone on the same page and understand that the kids are coming from imperfect environments. We all are. So if we're waiting for the perfect parents to walk through the door that act perfectly all the time and perfectly support their kids, and that's never going to happen. So we can't say, well, the kids can't read, or the parents aren't supportive, or they don't show. That said, you came into education knowing this. What are we going to do differently or better that's going to bring them in or take care of any of the problems that we're having right now, if we want to bring them in? So I always believe it's important to create a very universal expectations around things that are very important. If you have parent communication and how we instruct students and the type of behavior we expect from students, then what does that mean for the adults, like you said? And once we create those expectations, we need to train our staff, and that could be a regular sit-down training, it could be sending them out, it could be my feedback to them, it could be staff meetings, faculty meetings, grade level meetings, data meetings. I want to reemphasize my expectations and strategies on how we're going to address X, Y, Z issues. But that's not enough. We have to moderate. We have to fix some data points to it. What would that mean then? What's going to be different? And this is where the vision piece we talked about earlier comes into it as well. So it's also the why. Why is it important that we do this? Do we want to go through the way we're doing it and get the same results, or are we going to make some changes? And people are afraid of changes for several reasons. They've either been doing something a certain way for a long, long time, and they just don't want to change. Or they don't think the change is, what I find is mostly they don't think the change is going to matter. Yeah, we've done 6 ELA curriculums since I've been at this school over the past 25 years, and every 3 years we change it, and it doesn't matter, and we always start like this, so there's a lack of trust that the process is going to be done with fidelity, or you're going to check in with it. So as leaders, what we have to do is check in with our staff all the time and continue talking about these most important things that we want to see changed. Because if I just have my staff meeting in the full staff meeting in August, and every couple months I put a little blurb in the newsletter, And then I said, well, I told them 6 months ago that I wanted this. Why aren't they doing it? Well, I've answered my own question. You have to really reiterate the message strongly in every possible way at every chance you get. Almost to the point where they're saying, oh, here comes Mr. Rigorous Instruction himself. All he want, I want them to say that.
Yeah.
I want order this. I want those things. So if they're parroting me, then the message is, I feel pretty significant. It's been heard. And the other thing is, when I do have meetings or I do put things out, I see a lot of school leaders put things in the Dropbox or the Google Drive. If you want one way to say, I put something out and have no one read it, that's how you do it. If you really want people to see what you're putting out, you actually have to put it in the text of the email so they can see it. Even if I put an attachment, they're not going to open it. But if I'm sharing things, I have to overtly share them every chance I get. So they know we're on the same page and we're making progress in certain ways.
Yeah, I think that's huge right there. I think the communication piece, maybe we'll chase that for a couple seconds here. The communication piece, and by the way, I'm guilty. I was early in my career of hey, I said that in August. Why aren't you doing it? Okay, yeah, that's on me. That one's on me, 100%, right? But that communication piece is just so critical. And, the communication itself, this is something, this comes up with a lot of the schools and school leaders that I coach, and I'm sure you face this sometimes too, where, communication isn't just what you say. It's also what you do. And it's how frequently you talk. I love how you said it, hey, here comes, Mr. Rigorous Instruction himself, right? Because the more you own that vision, the more you own that belief, the more you live it out loud, the more they're actually hearing that communication. You're right. It can't just be, well, I threw it in the drive. We have a shared drive. Everybody should, they should have gone in and looked. Please, you probably haven't been in that shared drive in a month. Come on, right? So,
right.
Talk a little bit about that too. I mean, like, what are some communication insights that you like to share with folks?
Well, I think I look at it as if I have all my teachers are my class, then I have 40 teachers and I have a classroom of 40 people. So if I visualize that, and if I'm trying to get something across, say for example, it's higher order questions or something like that. And I use the red, yellow, green method. And so I might look at 30% of my folks and I say, they're already doing this. My data that I have collected through my informal walkthrough show that on a regular basis, these folks get it. Say 20 or 30%. So now I have 70% that are not. Now of the 70, 40% are trying or they get it sometimes. It's still not what I want to see, but at least they've committed and they're going in the right direction. Mm-hmm. And then I look at and I call them yellow, and then I have red, which might be 20% or 30%. And those are the folks that are just getting stuck. So I don't have to worry about my 20% for this. I can let them do the green folks. The yellow I might spend a little more time with. I might be a little more targeted. I might sit down and talk to them specifically and give them some feedback. And the red folks, I might say, are they unable to do it or are they unwilling to do it? And if they're completely unwilling and they don't want to do it, then that's a separate issue. That might result in some other things down the road unrelated to instruction. Or for the people that truly want to do it and just don't see how they can, for example, do higher level questions in mathematics, which is a real skill. That's a fair question. I owe it to them now to provide them some training or instruction to get them up to speed and show them how that can be done. And that can be done in myriad of ways, either having them visit classrooms or having my instructional coaches work with them, whatever that might look like. But then I can track the progress of red, yellow, green, just like I do check my progress of my kids who are levels 1, 2, 3, 4. It's the same thing. I'm using data to determine how much time and to what level I need to work with each person, team, grade level, subject area, whatever it might be.
Yeah, I think that's outstanding. And it gets back to, the two things I always talk about, which is being really clear and then being intentional. So you're being really intentional with how you allocate your time so that you're ensuring that those folks that you're labeling as red are getting the support that they need or getting the professional redirection that they might need if they're in that unwilling category as opposed to the unable category. I think that's outstanding stuff. So let's do this. Another conversation that you and I had, and we'd been talking about, was really around the coaching model that you're living through and that you're trying to bring to everybody, focusing on both hard skills and soft skills. So let's talk a little bit about what that looks like. Maybe give us some insight into what your coaching world looks like.
Yeah, this is really interesting. So I picked up on this going through the University of Buffalo's program. We got trained in this Hogan personality assessment, which measures 135 different things and doesn't just measure who you think you are, like most do. It also measures your reputation, how others view you, which really gives it some dimension. What I found is that, and this is one of those aha moments I had, so I could actually work with someone. So say I'm working with an assistant principal, and I've trained them in how to give feedback, verbal feedback and written feedback, but I'm looking at samples of the written feedback, and I'm just seeing it's not explicit at all. It's very high inference. It's more of it would really be great if you might think about trying this sometime, if one of those things where you try to really do that soft landing like a butterfly.
Exactly.
But then you say, well, how will this person come away with that feedback? And probably like, I guess I could do it, but I don't have to. And there's also, you don't want someone just hammering someone as well and just saying, you will do this starting tomorrow and this is the way it's going to be done, or that's not the right approach either. But when you do work with a lot of people to give that soft approach, what you find is that they have a very high empathy people very often. They don't want to hurt feelings. They don't want to, and maybe they had an experience. So then you say, well, why don't they want to hurt feelings? So you talk to them and you might find out that they gave some difficult, challenging feedback at another time, and that person they gave it to, who was a friend of theirs, no longer talks to them, or they angered all these people, or whatever happened. It was a traumatic experience to them, and that's why they're not doing it, and that's why so I could train them all day long on how to do it, but unless I work on the soft skills to overcome, they're never going to be able to pull off the hard skills. So what you try to do is find out what their mental model is. So, for example, giving hard feedback means people won't like me, would be a mental model maybe for them. And then once you address the root cause, well, tell me more about what happened that gave you that mental model. Then you can sort of coach them differently. Now I'm not coaching the hard skills, I'm coaching the why aren't they. And the why aren't they is going to be much more powerful than the how to. So hopefully once you can do that and set them up for some easier instances where they can give feedback and build their confidence a bit, that probably be the way to go. And there's so many different ways. If you and I got feedback from the same person, it's the exact same feedback, we might react to it completely different for 100 different reasons. And if someone took the time to say, why do you feel that way when they gave you the feedback, I would really have to search and say, you know what, it just rubbed me the wrong way. I can't tell you why this second, but there was a time when, and that opens up this whole conversation where you can really dig deep and help them improve in that area.
Well, and so much of that too gets to the core of being able to build a relationship so that people are willing to open up to that, to share that, and are, just feeling like they are in a safe space working with you as a coach. I think that's just really, really valuable information right there. Man, Greg, our time is just absolutely flying, which always happens here on the show. And what that means is we've reached that point in the show where I'm going to ask you the same question I ask everybody here on the Leaning Into Leadership podcast. And that is this: Greg, how are you leaning into leadership right now?
Well, I've started as a New Year's resolution, as part probably due to the fact that I went through the University of Buffalo's program in leadership. I listen to 1 or 2 books a month on tape now, and it's always geared towards leadership or feedback or something around there. And I just this great book by Jen Shirkani, Ego versus EQ. What a fabulous book. What you recognize is that 99% of the mistakes that we make as leaders, and I'm not talking about mistakes, well, maybe it is 99% of all mistakes, oftentimes are related somehow to the ego for many different reasons. Either we didn't want to take feedback because we're the best, so what does this person know? Or I'm just going to go this alone because these other people on my team haven't had this experience. Or well, I'm a technical expert, so I'm going to lead a team of people. I might not have great management skills, but they're going to recognize that I'm brilliant, and they're going to follow. And what you realize is these are all crash courses. So until we put the ego aside, which is a huge challenge for the vast majority of us, and lead with EQ, lead with our heart, lead with our brain, lead with maturity, good listening skills, and take into account not ourselves first, but the people that we're leading, we're going to make a lot better decisions as a result of that.
Oh, that's outstanding. You know what? I'm gonna go ahead and link that book in the show notes, folks, so you can go and check it out. I will probably go and grab it and add it on my Audible account as soon as we're done recording this episode of the podcast. I definitely want to check that out. I do a lot of the same thing. I love to listen to different leadership books, books that will help me just pick up new tips here and there. I just listened to a new book for me on time blocking. I mean, it's something I do anyway. This one had a new, unique take on time blocking. I love those types of things. So I will make sure and share that one in the show notes. Man, this has been so much fun, Greg. People may definitely want to get in contact with you, follow you on social media. What's the best way for people to connect with you?
Very timely question, Darren. I just, and this was sort of the impetus for me to do this. I said, well, if I'm going to be on a podcast, I need to get a website so I can house all my stuff. So it's Greg at MindStreamCoaching.com. MIND, all one word, MindStreamCoaching.com. Actually, it went live yesterday. There's still a few bugs to work out and a few changes to make, but you can look at my services and read more about me on MindStreamCoaching.com and contact me at Greg at MindStreamCoaching.com.
Perfect. We'll put that in the show notes so everybody can check that out. Again, man, I really appreciate you joining me here on the Leaning Into Leadership podcast. Have an awesome, awesome day.
Darren, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Outstanding conversation there with Greg Speranza. I certainly appreciate him coming on the show. Finally had the opportunity to sit down and hit the record button with him. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you reach out to Greg. His information is down there in the show notes. Make sure you get connected with him. And now it's time for a pep talk. This week's pep talk leans into something that I've been talking about for a little while. If you follow me regularly, especially on social media, you know that I've been sharing a lot of time management tips. Almost daily, I'm jumping on and sharing something about a time management tip for school leaders because I know, number one, how valuable your time is as a school leader, and number two, how difficult it is to keep the time bandits from stealing your time. The one I want to talk about today is a topic that I've been hitting quite a bit lately, and that's micromanagement. As leaders, sometimes we feel like we need to have our hands in everything. Like our fingerprints must be on literally every part of the organization. But the truth is, the more we do that, the less we're empowering people around us to really step in, to really grow, and to really thrive. So I want to challenge you to maybe jump up on the balcony. You know how I feel about balcony level leadership. I want you to jump up on the balcony and think about your leadership and think about how heavily involved you are in things that you really don't need to be heavily involved in. You know what I'm talking about, right? You know, whether it's, you are rewriting work that other people do, or you are making them check with you on every single decision they're going to make before they're allowed to make a decision, whatever it might be. Just kind of evaluate yourself. Am I doing a good job of allowing the people around me to lead from their role? Or am I potentially getting in their way? Wherever you may be on that scale, that will tell you and maybe allow you to focus on something as you go into 2025 in terms of how much more you can pull back, allow others to lead from their space so that you can really lean into those high-level leadership things that only you can do from your position. That's what I've got for you this week, folks. Thank you so much for joining me here on the Leaning Into Leadership podcast. As always, get out there, have a road to awesome day.